Hello everyone, good afternoon and happy Monday. It is time for your Motivation Monday. I'm Pastor Nate and I'm excited to bring you a word of encouragement in the form of a testimony of something that happened to me just this last week. I was out working at a county fair with a few buddies and I was getting to know some of the people I was working with because I didn't know anyone when I was out there. So we're just making small talk, getting to know each other, and there's this one young man who took an interest in asking me questions. And he kept asking me questions. What's your name? Where do you work? Where do you live? Where are you from? What do you do? And he said that he recognized me from somewhere but couldn't pinpoint it. And I felt bad because I had no idea who this kid was. I had no idea he was. I had no memory of him. Didn't recognize him at all. After a few more questions, he finally realized where he recognized me from. He recognized me from a past job that I did about 8-9 years ago. And I did social work for a year. And he remembered me because he was one of my clients during that time. And when I think back on that job for myself, I think about how difficult that job was. I did it for a year and it was emotionally draining. It was just so difficult to see some of the life circumstances that people were in and working through that with them. It was a tough year, and I didn't want to do that job for much longer. It was just one short year that I was doing that. But this kid, he remembered me from my time doing social work. He was in some trouble in school in Kearney, and he had to come to Grand Island to be a part of something that I was doing there. So I had him for an entire school day, probably 4 or 5 times. And he told me that he remembered coming to that and enjoying it so much. He was excited that I was there running it. Now, hear me out. I am not saying, oh, look at Nate, look how great I am. No, I'm saying from my perspective, when I think back on that job, I think about how tough it was. I think about how it was a rough year. But this kid, this young man, he looked back on that time and was excited every time he got to see me. There were a few other people that were working that program too, and he didn't care for them. But he was excited when I came in there. And that really shook me. It shook me because when I think back on that time, I think about how bad my attitude was. I think about how difficult my days were. But when he thinks back on that time, he thinks about how much he enjoyed coming to something he didn't like, but he enjoyed it because I was there. Because I was uplifting, I was encouraging, I was nice. I don't know what it was for him. But I was something that he was lacking in his life, that he didn't see in his life. So this is my challenge. This is what I got out of it. We have no idea the trail that we leave and who it's going to affect at what point. This was 8 years later. 8 years later, and we crossed paths, and this guy said, hey, I remember you. I liked you. You made my day better. And looking back on that time, I had no idea I was doing that. I thought I was just doing a job. I thought I was just waiting for the hours to go by so that I could go home. We never know how our trail is going to affect people. And that's the challenge. That is the mindset that we need to take into every area of our life, especially in our jobs where we're spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week. We have a lot of people that we interact with in those unchurchy, ungodly times where we get into autopilot. We just go, we do the tasks, we put on blinders, and we get through our day. But we need to open our mind, open our eyes to see, man, the things that I'm doing now, it's going to affect people in the future. So what kind of trail are you leaving? Are you leaving a trail that leads towards Jesus, that leads towards joy? I didn't feel like I was that day, but I must have been having a good day. But now, from here on out, after hearing that story, I need to be aware. No matter what, if I'm grocery shopping, if I'm driving out of town, if I'm working with someone, whatever it is I'm doing, I need to be aware of what kind of trail I'm leaving behind because it will affect people. It may not affect them tomorrow or next month. It may be a decade later. But it's important for us to think through that and understand that the trail we leave matters Because I said this a few weeks ago, we may be the only representation of Jesus that some people will ever see, ever in their entire life. Some people will never ever step into a church, but their coworker or their friend's dad that they know is a Christian, that might be the only representation of Jesus they ever see. So what kind of trail are you leaving? What kind of trail am I leaving? I needed to take a step back and think about what I'm doing in my life and how I can leave a trail that leads to Jesus, that leads to joy, that leads to hope, to mercy, to forgiveness, to all these things that Jesus offers us. Because that's our purpose as Christians, to be Christ-like and to lead people to Jesus. So what kind of trail are you leaving? What kind of trail are you leaving behind? What are people going to pick up? I just want to encourage you to keep that on your mind today, throughout the rest of this week, because it matters. It matters because people's eternities are at stake. Let's represent Jesus really, really well by leaving a trail that leads to Him. I hope you guys are inspired. I hope you're encouraged. I honestly hope you're challenged. And I hope to see you again next Monday.